Good evening. I hereby call to order the June 27th, 2018 meeting of the Gaithersburg Historic District Commission. May I have a roll call, please, starting on my far left?
Frank Johnson.
Gregory Mann.
Mark Feinstein.
Mary Jo LaFrance.
Dean Ventola.
John Roddy.
Chris Kurtz.
Robert Love.
Chris Berger.
Okay, we have a quorum. For the minutes, did everybody get a chance to read last month's minutes? And
Yes.
does anybody have any concerns or thoughts or issues with it?
No.
No? Okay, then I'm open to a motion to pass the minutes.
I so
to approve
move.
it. Anybody second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
No. Abstain. So that is 2 abstentions and 4 ayes. Okay. I'll next read our preliminary statement, which is as follows. This commission is empowered to meet and act under Article 12 of the City Code of Gaithersburg. The technical qualifications of the staff of this commission and the members of the commission are on file with the City of Gaithersburg, are available on request to any applicant, and are hereby made a part of the legal record of each and every application heard today. Each application heard today is considered on its own merits and is not to be considered as establishing a precedent for any other application. What I'd like to do next is check for conflicts of interest on anything we're be talking about tonight. I guess there's just one issue, but there might be, other things. But if anybody has any conflicts, please state them now for anything. None? Okay, very good. All right. Next then is we have demolition permit application reviews. It is a DEMO-16655- 2018. It's the demolition of building more than 50 years old. So do we have a report from staff?
We do.
Very good.
The building at 102 South Frederick is a 2-story Queen Anne style building that was constructed circa 1912 and is located in Observatory Heights. It is not historically designated, either individually or as part of a district. The property is zoned CD, corridor development. The demolition permit comes before the HDC in accordance with Section 24-231 of the City Code, which requires buildings slated for demolition that are more than 50 years old to be reviewed by the HDC for architectural and historic importance in accordance with Section 24-226. Some background information. The building originated as a residence and in later years was converted into offices, at which time the porch likely was enclosed. The building was owned by Mayor Harold Morris in the 1950s and 60s before he became mayor, but according to his granddaughter, there's no indication he actually lived there. The applicant, Louis Leon, purchased the building early last year. He received a staff approval in May 2017 to replace the exterior wood siding with brick. Before Mr. Leon completed that work, he submitted AFP 7759-2017 to remove the illegal addition on the rear of the building, that's the area you see in the white Tyvek, and constructed a 2-story addition in its place. The HDC provided a courtesy review of that application at its December meeting. Before the applicant proceeded with that addition, a survey revealed that approximately 4 feet of the front of the building's porch along South Frederick Avenue was located in state of Maryland right-of-way, which complicates the title of the property. So with that revelation, the applicant has decided to pursue demolition of the building. He has indicated a desire to replace the building with a new office building on the property, but no plans have been submitted yet. Also note that the applicant is willing to salvage as many materials as possible. The historic preservation element of the 2003 Gaithersburg Master Plan, which was adopted in 2007, lists 102 South Frederick on a table that is preceded with the following. Significant research of these properties has not been conducted, or limited information regarding the significance of these properties is currently unavailable. Redevelopment proposals involving the removal or significant alteration of these structures and sites should require and include thorough research as to the significance of the sites and structures, in addition to the customary reviews any proposal would elicit. The building was not included in the recently adopted historic preservation element of the 2018 Gaithersburg Master Plan because of the drastic alterations to its exterior. A Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties form was completed for 102 South Frederick in 1983. The recorders wrote the following: "This building has been greatly modified." The form was updated in 1999. Under the Statement of Significance, the recorder wrote, This house was built in 1911 as a prominently visible home on the main street of town. As the highway gained more traffic, the house became less desirable as a residence and is now, with several of its neighbors, an office serving as a commercial buffer to the neighborhood beyond it. The HDC has two options tonight. It can direct the city manager to issue the demolition permit, or if the building has the reasonable probability of being designated in accordance with section 24-226, it can direct the city manager to withhold issuance of the demo permit for up to 6 months. The subject building is of a simple design and construction and is not unique to the city, state, or nation. The building's exterior has been changed, most notably the incompatible enclosed front porch on the front and the recent replacement of the clapboard siding with brick. The subject building was not the site of a significant single historic event, nor is it strongly identified with a person or group of people who influence society. And the owner and applicant, Mr. Louis Leon, is here if you have any questions. If you'll please come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Louis Leon.
Good evening,
Good
welcome.
evening. Thank you.
Would you like to add, would you like to make statements or present your thoughts on why you'd like to raise this building and why you think we should agree to it?
Thank you. Yes, I bought the building about a year and 4 or 5 months ago, and my idea was to try to just put brick around it to make it as nice as possible. We dug a foundation in the back to put rebar in so the brick could set on it safely. And we realized that the previous owner had made an addition in the rear that was just filled with garbage and dirt. The city of Gaithersburg told us we couldn't just put the dirt back and try to use it. We had to knock it down. We then tried to say, okay, then we'll try to extend the first floor, second floor, and basement to have a little bit more space. Topographical survey was requested that indicated that the 4 feet from the door into the building was owned by the state of Maryland, which causes, I don't know by certain, but it clouds the title, but I think it also makes it difficult for the state of Maryland, if it wants to do something, to have that. My proposal would be to demolish the building and then build a nice building that has something very similar to it, a 3-story building. I don't know if you would like to see what I was hoping I could do with it.
I would.
Something like this.
Yes, certainly, if you can, just we'll pass it down. Everyone.
Not set in stone, but something
No.
that's brick, that's very
That's
conservative, that would be hopefully, and obviously I would, if you guys thought I could do something else to keep it within that historical model or style, I would definitely want to do that. I don't want to make anything modern. I would like to be as compatible as possible with that is, but I think, I personally believe it's an upgrade. And I have contracted a company that's already done some feasibility studies and made drawings, concept drawings, that as soon as, if you do approve it, that we would start moving on that right away. The building as it sits now is very dangerous. I think we had submitted some photographs that indicate that the building from the addition is coming apart from the building. And apparently, not certain, but apparently the person who made the addition in the rear had broken through the walls of the rear of the building and had the addition kind of go through. So that has created a great deal of instability in all of the rear of the house. Apparently the addition on the front was a closed-off porch that may have gone all the way around the side. We had taken some pictures of the inside that showed that the wood that was inside now is on the outside is just plywood, that apparently that's an addition that wasn't done legally. It's very unstable. Unfortunately, this February, the pipes broke, and it caused the water damage to the staircase and to the first floor. I would like to be able to demolish it and put something in there that's consistent with what the building represented at one time. But that's what the design that I was looking to do.
Okay. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak on behalf of this proposal or against it? And I see no one. Okay, then I guess we can start with the commission. We can start with you, Chris. And what I'd like to do is you could ask the applicant questions, but I also believe you can make statements and present your thoughts to us as well. And then after we all go through, then we have kind of an open forum with the commission.
I have no comments, and I support the recommendation to demolish.
Okay, John, you're next.
All right. In the 10 years or so I've been on this commission, I don't think any case has given me as much trouble as this one. I have an emotional attachment to the position that the applicant finds himself in. I too was seduced by a nice old building and sunk my heart and soul into it, as well as my fortune. And it pains me, but I have to say that at this point I am having great concerns about asking the city the city manager to withhold issuance. I mean, I do believe that the city manager should withhold issuance of the demolition order. I certainly invite my colleagues to correct me where I'm in error, as well as you, counsel. The applicant claims that there is a dangerous condition on the rear of the building. The lack of a proper foundation is basically the issue, and where if you were to remove what's there now, there is a possibility of more may collapse. I think the rear of the building is severable, and engineering technology allows us to support the building so it is not a danger. I think that he has unfortunately been the victim of a bad inspection report that should have reported this before. Similarly, the second claim is that there's a certain convenience to clear up this state claim for conflict of title of some 4 feet on the front of the building. For those of us who've been around for a while, we obviously know that the building hasn't moved since 1911. This problem probably arose when they widened 355, and the state was the actor in that particular activity. Since that time, which was some 20 years ago, there have been title searches, surveys done every time that property was to turn over. In addition, the state, when they widened the road, should have put a plat down there at the courthouse down the road that told one and all where the extent of their boundaries were, as well as what is now yours. Anyone who did a title search should have known that. And I know as well as anybody else, as do you, sir, that those title searches are not cheap.
Yes, correct.
And you unfortunately didn't get your money's worth. The third claim is that it's cost prohibitive. And I can skip this just for a moment and go to the fourth claim. That it's lost, the building itself has lost its historical value. I think it's inescapable that it's still on the main street in town. It still has a very prominent location. It's on a corner lot smack dab in the middle of the city itself. The silhouette is basically the same. It's got the same basic architectural style that it enjoyed back in 1911. The neighborhood still has character, and that character would be at risk were we to grant the application to demolish. Now, what you have proposed, sir, I like what you've got, but that's not before us tonight. Your proposal for what is new.
That's correct.
Going back to number 3, the cost prohibitive. I want to thank Mr. Berger and Council Frank Johnson for setting up a training session about 2 months ago where we discussed this very issue. And unfortunately for them, I'm about to bludgeon them with the paperwork that came from that. We are dealing with an issue where when we're dealing about economic hardship, we're not talking about what the common person may understand economic hardship to be. We're talking about a legal taking, where you are now prohibited from using the property as it was previously designated and previously used. And all things considered, this is where my greatest agony is. I don't see that you really are, that I don't think that you are prohibited from using the property still in the future should it be repaired. And apparently the Maryland authorities suggest that we bifurcate the issue, that we decide first whether or not the order for demolition to be granted, and if we decide that we're going to withhold that, if this commission decides that, then we have to decide whether economic hardship is to be considered and as an excusable avenue to achieve what you're asking. The legal standard is that it's an unconstitutional regulatory taking, that you're denied all reasonable beneficial use or return on the property as a result of this commission's denial of your action. And that is on a variety of factors. Expenditures alone will not provide a complete picture. Revenue, vacancy rates, operating expenses, financing, tax incentives, other issues are all relevant considerations. In addition to the economic impact, the Supreme Court in several cases has said a reasonable or beneficial use of the property is also an important factor. The owner's ability to carry out the traditional use of the property or whether another viable use for the property remains is central to the issue in this case. And also pertinent is whether the owner's objectives were realistic given the condition of the property at the time he purchased it. And the fact that these repairs are costly is not enough. All of us know that they're going to be costly. I mean, that's obvious. As I say, it pains me greatly, sir, but at the moment I'm not convinced, and I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I would just note that I appeared before the commission before to do the renovations. My initial was to make the building better, but then I couldn't do it because I found out about the topographical survey. I don't know if I could put money into a place where the title's clouded, but I do think it's cost prohibitive. But I understand. Thank you.
Okay, Mary Jo, would you like to go next?
Thank you, yes.
Do you, I think it might help just to give a little bit of background here, and not to take any issue with what's been said, but in terms of the economic hardship issue, that does become relevant for a designated property. The issue in this particular case is the property is not designated. When you reviewed it in December, that was a courtesy review, just based on its location, but this property in itself hasn't been designated. Your process tonight is to consider, is that a possibility? And the delay you could put in place would be up to 6 months to allow the process to go forward, to consider it, and for it potentially to be designated. But I just want to clarify as you're going through your consideration certainly as to what to do.
Thank you, Frank, and I
Sure.
do appreciate the clarification. If I could ask you a question.
Not at all.
Is this going to take 6 months? I mean, that's really unfair to him. I mean,
Understood.
He's sitting here with an awful lot of money out.
Much understood, and I guess I would ask Chris and or Greg, in terms of processes, timing for designation.
Or at least the research to find out if it's
Right.
worthy of designation.
Right.
There has been
Yeah,
some
we have the
research that
research.
you've included.
For, as I mentioned, the two Maryland Inventory of Historic Property forms, first in the 80s and then in 1999. So there is background research on the property. So doing the research shouldn't take long. It's just, I think a lot of it depends on the calendar
Process.
for the mayor and city council, and planning commission would have to weigh in as well.
And then once designated, then the question would be, the applicant certainly would have the right to come forward and nonetheless still request demolition, and at that time, the very things that, and considerations in terms of economic hardship, and you're right, cost alone, that's just not it. You analyzed it quite well, so we may be calling on you to give a training on that issue at some point. We do appreciate that. But timing, I don't know whether 6 months would quite, in terms of process and approvals and recommendations that are needed, but that's what the code provides, and it's not necessarily 6 months, it may be up to 6 months that can be imposed in terms of a delay.
Okay, so I would like to ask the applicant, are you aware that there are some tax credits that you could receive for the renovation of the outer part of the building that you're currently working on?
That's not correct. It's not a designated property.
Because, well, okay, sir, if you had a designated property, then you could, in fact, apply for tax credits for that work. So that might be something to consider.
I would probably, I don't know what I would do if it's, I mean, I
do
put so
realize
much money into this
that
thing
it's
already.
not historically designated. So we are charged with deciding if we should request that it should go through the process or not. And do we give it more leniency because it isn't already designated? And I will say that...
We are required for more leniency than if it was, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say it is a familiar site on 355, and that it is part of Gaithersburg's story of the early 19th century years of settlement. And sadly, we have already lost many of those buildings and homes. So that would be my argument for that, as well as the city code has a specific development heritage. Well, it fits with that. So there are several points right now with what's before us tonight. Whether strong or weak, it's up to the other commissioners to decide how they feel about that. But we do have some evidence to say, okay, this is worth looking at. Now, even though we were presented with two historic heritage studies, that said, both of them said that they lacked enough information to be thorough. So the question is, do we take some time to do a more thorough research on this property? And then, of course, the obvious things about not wanting to designate it historic is that there's been so many changes to the outside, may not be significant enough, or it's in poor condition. But what I would like to say is, although historic designation is before us tonight, that the applicant has submitted to us evidence to consider, which is that this building is unsafe. So my answer to that is, without a structural engineer's report, I can't consider that full evidence, even though historic designation is the only thing on the table.
Just to clarify, this is not for historic designation tonight. It's for the demo permit for the building.
I'm sorry, if consideration, or, right, so if we were to deny the demolition permit.
You would not be denying the demolition permit. You're just saying that the staff should look at it for up to 6 months. Again, even the timeline, the way the code is written, the
I
commission
gotcha.
doesn't set the timeline. It just says the city manager can't hold it more than 6 months.
Right.
I just wanted to clarify if they
Correct.
were supposed to consider all the evidence, even though our purview is only about whether deciding if it should be demolished or not this evening, that there needs to be more proof in the record to even consider that information. Because it can be said, but we need to see it in writing so that we know that it really is unsafe. We know that the addition is unsafe. We know the addition is falling away from the house. Anybody could see that. But as far as the main house goes, without a report, we can only assume that it's structurally sound. So I would prefer that this property should be studied to see if it has more significance, and I would prefer that the demolition permit be withheld. And that's where I am.
Okay, Warren?
I actually took a similar methodology to Commissioner Roddy in terms of looking at the structure and understanding kind of the 4 factors he mentioned, and came to actually a different conclusion. I'm less concerned, and it's always funny when that happens, but I'm less concerned about the structure, whether it's safe. I mean, I'm obviously concerned about that, but from the purview of what we're looking at, I don't see that as a factor as in my judgment, nor do I factor in the title and the fact that it's over the right of way for 355. or the some of the other elements like the frozen pipes and things like that. What I tried to, once I got through all that, I kind of looked at it as, okay, those are just layers of complication, but they don't actually deal with the root of what we're trying to figure out. And it comes down to whether or not we think that the property is worthy of study to determine whether it is actually has historical elements to it. And looking at the at the factors of whether it's culturally significant, you could argue that, yeah, there are. I mean, it's been a building on that block on 355 since the early 20th century. So it's culturally significant to a degree, but never from a standpoint of, okay, this is one of the significant houses in the city. I mean, yeah, a mayor owned it at one point, but did not live there. There has been no, I mean, according to the public record, there's no other real cultural significance in terms of anything happening on this property over the lifespan, other than the fact it's been there for a while. So then, looking at from a architectural design or whether it exemplifies any of the design worthiness, I think there's, if you look at it from a magnifying glass and you look at certain elements, you could, and you kind of block out all the other elements, you would say, okay, I like this feature of it. This feature at the gable is reminiscent of kind of a common house that was built in Gaithersburg of this time frame. But there's been so many other changes over the period of time, and it is, like you were saying, Mary Jo, is a story of the history of the city, but it's not a story of, I don't feel it is a positive story of the history of the city. I think it's things have been done to this house that were done without care and consideration over the time, like the enclosing the porch the way it was done, the windows over time, other elements over time have been kind of step by step taking away any kind of historical significance, in my opinion, to the building, to a point where you could get it back, but to get it back, you'd be stripping away so much of what is there now, in my opinion, that it's already beyond a point where you'd be completely changing the character of the current building, which I don't think is significant enough to withhold the demo permit.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for you, sir.
Yes.
With from your understanding, your building, is it correct that it is deemed, at least by the state, to be 4 feet over on what they consider their property? Is the 4 foot the dimension in question?
That's what again, I'm not.
Yeah, we're not going to hold you to it. I'm just trying to understand.
That's what my understanding is, yes.
And that's on the front, obviously, on 355, and the side, on the side street is not an issue. It's just the front part.
That's correct.
Here are my thoughts. Actually, let me ask this. The biggest thing that came to my mind, and I'll go into depth a little bit in a second, is are you ever considering deeding this to the city or to the state, this 4 foot strip? Because here's what I'm getting at. If you do have a conflict of title, you have two people arguing for the same plot of land, or would you be, I'm not suggesting you should be, but would you be open to deeding that and removing that issue from your parcel altogether?
To clarify, that 4 feet that he's discussing is actually owned by the state currently.
Okay, but
which
then,
means part of his building is actually in state right away.
Oh, the building itself is over.
Correct.
Just similar to the one next door then. They wanted to build on with the porch. They wanted to enclose it, but they couldn't grow any further. Is that 104 next door?
That would be 106, I believe.
Okay,
yeah.
but that's the one, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now is it only the porch that's now enclosed that is over that 4 foot addition?
Per the survey that we received from the applicant, yes.
Right, so if the porch itself was removed, which by the way, it's my personal opinion, my personal architectural opinion, it should be. It is, I imagine it was once a beautiful open columnar porch, colonnade porch, that was reminiscent of the style, and then they built a different style upon it, and I'm not even sure it was stylistic. They just put a mansard here and closed it there, just because they wanted it to do, in my personal opinion, cheap construction. So I'm all for eliminating that completely, and then you can have an open porch, depending on the city codes, whether it's covered or not. Open porches are not enclosed, so they're always allowed to go over the property line. But, so that, I guess, is one big question. If the building can be usable, with that 4-foot gone, I believe personally that the building certainly can be renovated back to condition. I think the brick was unfortunate, to be honest with you. I think it's not stylistic to that, style. Although it's Victorian, it's supposed to be Queen Anne. The Queen Anne decoration looks like it's long been gone, but nevertheless, should have been clapboard, replaced with clapboard. But it is what it is. It's brick now, but the massing is still there, and the massing can still be saved. I believe the structure is not an issue for me because it's only a 2-story wooden structure. You can easily put wood columns and more studding in there to hold that up. So that to me is not an issue. The biggest thing, so then also, as far as I was concerned when I was reading through it, I believe that this was one of the earliest homes on the area, 1911, and it was owned by a guy, and perhaps his wife, I know he did, who worked for the railroad, which of course is significant. Yeah, I mean, and architecturally and visually, and the house next door as well, the 106, they both look like, in their day, really good pieces of architecture. But I'm a realist, and I also understand that 355 is a commercial corridor. It is Gaithersburg's big commercial corridor. I looked at length in the aerials to see what structures were encroaching close to the main road. And there is this one, and there is the one next door, and then one in Gaithersburg, Center City, that looks like it's, if I was not mistaken, like a 4-story apartment building, but I don't even think that it is as close as yours. So when I went back and forth down the road using Google Earth, these two properties seem to be the only ones stopping the road from being widened. Now, to me, I am an architect first, and I love architecture, but I'm also an urbanist, and I understand cities need to grow, or they die. So I understand, or to me, it's important that a city has to have the ability to make its corridors bigger if need be. That's going to be a long way down the road, 30 years from now, probably, when there might be pressure enough to widen 355, I don't know. But nevertheless, there are 3 structures that look, and certainly these 2, that look like they may be in the way. So I'm not opposed to, and the other thing too is, there's not much of this architecture left. I can say that if this was in Old Town, I wouldn't even say anything more than there's no way, because this is a nice building. But where it is, it almost looks like it's a flower in a sea of grass, and there are pressures that are put on it. So I can be convinced either way to save it or to widen it, but I can't be convinced to raise it unless there's a possibility that the building can be pushed wide enough where the road can expand, in 30 years if need be. So that is my point.
If I just may mention,
yes, sir, please do.
If we do demolish the building and the new building is further back, Maryland then has clear title without having to worry about.
Well, that's why I asked that initially. That was right out of the gate.
And my intention is to put the building further back, so in almost conceding that the state of Maryland owns it.
That sounds wonderful. When you passed around that photo, though,
yeah.
I thought that I saw it right on the sidewalk. The new addition, the new building that you may be proposing at a future time.
No, it's definitely set back as much as possible.
Could I see the photo again, then? Okay, because that would be great. If you.
I think that's just an example because it's got.
Yeah, it's more just a design. It's just design of the building.
Yeah, okay, I thought that was okay.
The new building will go further back.
Yeah. Okay.
In some ways, saying to the state of Maryland.
That's right there. That's right. That's right on the sidewalk.
And may I ask the applicant another question?
Absolutely, please do. As a matter of fact, let's say we're in the open discussion here, so
Okay.
just please
in that
jump
case, would you be willing to move the current building minus the legal addition as a setback with a new foundation instead.
To
You mean-
to pick up that
Mhm.
building and move it?
No.
I think that, I'll let you answer.
I'm sorry.
But, no, I'll let you answer,
Okay.
but I think that the expense would be so high that I couldn't force him, I personally wouldn't vote for that because,
Just asking.
no, it's a good question, it's a good answer. I mean, it's a good question, but my concern is that that would be a tremendous expense to say something that isn't a gem. It's a very nice building, and like I said, I would certainly keep it personally, but I'm not sure I would vote to try and have him be burdened by that. But please now, I didn't
Yeah,
mean to
I mean, at
interrupt.
this point, I've spent so much money that now I'm going to my house to try to refinance, to try to just get to where I need to get to. I don't know what I would do but again, in the building that I would build would be something that I would want opinion from the commission to say, how would you like it so it somehow replicate the same type of style that you would value in terms of the way it was. I mean, what I had there was just a model, but that building was empty. It was vacant when I bought it. It was a scuba diving place. It's run down. People sell drugs down. We see people throwing drugs. Somebody else comes by and picks it up. There's a lot of stuff that goes there. And all I want to do is open up an office and hire people. And if I can't, then I can't. But I at my wit's end, as you had indicated, you had gone through this too, and it's a trial by fire kind of issue.
Yeah, I personally wouldn't want you to try and replicate. I would not want you to raise the building and then try and rebuild it in a different location. To me, that's not something that I think anyone will look favorably upon. We had a meeting in our commission last month where somebody was saying we're changing history to build a new building, and so that's a sensitive issue. So if this gets raised, I would think that the best use of your property would be, or a better use of property would be more of this nature, I would think, based on what is coming down the road from 355 and the center of Gaithersburg growth that way. So I would not want you to worry about that personally. Keep going on any thoughts here.
To add on to what the applicant said, a reminder that any new construction on this property would require a courtesy review by the
Sure.
agency.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
And if I could just mention one other thing, when I appeared before the commission before,
Mhm.
the suggestion was that I keep the bay, I don't know what it's called, the bay window,
Mhm.
which we did. We were going to do that.
Mhm.
We asked the architect to change it, so we kept that.
Wonderful.
And we
Thank
do
you.
want to comply with the commission, and if we do go before you and if we allow it to demolish and come back, any suggestions we would follow to keep or to.
Yes, sir.
Taking into account everything that everybody said, I think we have an applicant before us who has demonstrated absolute good faith
Mhm.
in trying to save this building, and be responsive to the city code, to any thoughts we might have. And then ran into what I think if I were in the applicant's shoes, I would consider pretty much a deal breaker. And it isn't even as if he could take off that front porch, should he so choose, and try and undo the damage and add on as he tried to do before. So, yes, it's, Mark, I like the way you put it. If we could focus on any number of individual items and say, this is very, nicely done, and we certainly ought to be mindful of it. But in the totality of things, in the fact that the applicant will be coming before us for a courtesy and then I think a full review where we'll have a chance to look at what he wants to do, and certainly sounds like he wants to put something in its place which is going to be compatible and sympathetic, I would, again, as I said earlier, would support the demolition of this, figuring that for whatever reasons this has gone beyond the point of no return, plus the right-of-way issue, and also as we've mentioned, it opens up the future, speaking from an urbanist standpoint, widening the road. So I would support us approving the demolition permit.
And the one last thing I'd like to mention is the other concern I have, although the applicant has said that he was going to do some salvaging of some things in the interior, which is none of our purview. That said, though, because of it not being historically designated, we could ask it, but it wouldn't be a condition. Is that correct?
No.
We can still make a condition.
It's a condition.
You can certainly put it in there in terms of enforceability. You can put it in as a condition, but you are correct that ultimately that does come down to, because you're not granting the right necessarily, I mean, by implication perhaps, but the decision on demolition is really not here. The issue is this property either undergoing active consideration or to have the reasonable probability, and I'm citing the code on this one, to therefore hold up to 6 months. Now, what the code actually says, city manager shall withhold such permit for a maximum of 6 months, but as Greg had mentioned, it's not like you necessarily would set the amount, but what you're saying is this is a property that we have an interest in that has a reasonable probability. That's really the issue.
Yep.
The condition was partly based on the applicant coming forward to say, I'm willing to try to preserve what I can of the inside, and that's why it's there in terms of enforceability. I mean, it's probably difficult to enforce as a practical matter anyway, but certainly adding that in, that's a condition, that's certainly appropriate. But again, your consideration is this something that we would potentially, as I say, reasonable probability of being designated?
Just a
Yeah, one of the items that actually sealed the deal for me in my decision was that recommendation from the staff, or at least a condition that the staff put in as a recommended condition, because it made me start to think about what materials would be salvageable, and start thinking about the exterior building. Okay, the masonry, well, that's not original, so that's not salvageable. Okay, the windows, well, that's not original, so that's not salvageable. What about the roof? Well, same thing, it's not original, it's not salvageable. So you start crossing off all these elements that you think are historic, and none of them are into this building other than the original mass when you strip away the couple additions. So that just kind of, for me, kind of made it seem like, what are we doing here? Are we really kind of forcing something so much to try to make a building more than it actually is, unfortunately?
Seems like the salvageable materials would be on the inside,
interior,
the
I was
5
thinking the
panel
same thing,
doors,
the doors and
window
stuff.
trim.
But the
that kind of
applicant
stuff.
also, I think, put it in his application that he wants to do that. So
Yeah.
I think we could put it in as something we want, but I think he's going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I have retained Mr. Moxley, who's a green demolition person, and he has spoken to Mr. Rob Earhart, and he's indicated that, yes, anything that the council or that the city requires us to do in terms of green recycling, we will do. I don't want to do anything that I want to do everything by the book. Now, the other thing, and I'm not sure if I should mention this or not, but one of the proposals that we have from, what's the name of it? MHGPA, which is one of the firms that were doing the civil engineering portion of it, has proposed that maybe closing off the entrance to Route 355 and only leaving the Cedar Avenue one. That would be something I would consider. I know that's something the city would like because of the speed and stuff. So that's something that we would consider in our new project, closing off that entrance to 355, which is really, I think, something that's, I've seen a lot of accidents there, people coming down the bridge, but that's something else that we would, I don't know if that something is an issue, but we would do anything we can for the recycling, the green recycling.
You want to say something? Let me ask Frank a quick question.
Absolutely.
Frank, I'm not sure if it's now or if it is when the applicant comes for the proposal. Are we allowed to, as a governing body, to require a minimum setback for the new construction?
Well, the new construction has to go through a whole building permit stage, and there are setback requirements that would already be in place. And so I would,
So
you
the-
could certainly suggest.
That's okay.
And that's part of courtesy review, but
Right.
in terms of requiring, that would fall to
Okay. Does
permitting, if not.
anybody know what
planning
the
code.
setback is on 355?
The CDs, I don't know if I remember off the top of my head, does not have a setback. There is discussions about setbacks relating to the master plan, though. The master plan does recommend that actually buildings on the corridor actually be closer to the street front and parking put in the rear.
Oh.
And if I may, I
That's
don't know,
opposite. Yes, sir.
these are one of the
But trying to be in the right of way.
drawings that they prepared for me. I don't know if you would like to see it.
You're saying for your proposal?
For the new building.
Sure, sure, please.
And while Mr. Leon is passing that around, I have the aerial up, and he also owns 104 South Frederick next
I'm
door.
glad you
I
brought
thought
that
I
up.
read that, yeah.
I thought I'm glad you brought that up.
As it relates to setbacks, so the other thing I would add is with any new construction, we would also require a public utility easement to be placed upon the right of way. That is a 10-foot setback right there to be built
Okay.
in.
Here's where I'm going with my question.
I'm sorry, the drawing does show that 355 exit will be closed.
Okay, so, okay. Oh, I misunderstood you then. Right now, isn't this 355 up at the top?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were going to put it further back, away from 355. You're saying that you're going to
No.
be placing it
The
towards...
building?
The building.
My understanding is that I have to put it on the front of the building.
So you have to put it on the front of the site?
Yeah.
Per
Yes.
what you
Right.
just said, Greg. Okay.
I would like it to be as far back as possible because I
But
don't.
you're not allowed to. Got it,
Right,
okay.
Exactly.
All
So
right.
all these drawings are in conformity with my understanding of the code
I
is
see.
that company that I just mentioned.
Okay, well, here's where I'm going with my question on on this topic, and Greg, maybe you can help me more than anybody, is, does the city have any plans over the next 30 years to widen 355?
355 is actually state highway, so it's, wouldn't be our
Okay,
widening.
but do you know if State Highway then has?
There are plans to put widening at 355 for essential bus rapid transit in the future.
Okay, okay, so now, here's my $1,000,000 question. You can
It's
see where
known
I'm
as the
going.
CCT, if anybody's.
You can see where I'm going with my
Yeah,
question.
but it's part
No,
of it.
it's actually named as 355 BRT.
Okay,
CCT is a different
That
system.
goes down Great Seneca.
Okay.
all right, but nevertheless, you see if he rebuilds the building there, and again, it's not part of tonight's purview, but it does help me understand whether we should raise this building now or not. Isn't that counterproductive of where State Highway and Frederick wants to?
Yeah,
I mean,
not
Frederick
necessarily.
wants to be?
As part of the review process, we do route the plans to State Highway since it is abutting their right of way.
Sure,
So they would chime in and obviously give us their comments as well. We also have a right-of-way a requirement for minimum right-of-way in the master plan and the transportation element. I don't know it off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But
That's okay.
we would also review it to that as well. I mean,
Okay.
there's been extensive studies that have been done about
Okay.
widening 325, so we would make sure that where the building is placed would not conflict with those.
okay, all right, very good. I don't have any more questions now. I recognize you, sir. You've been very patient, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, although I may be swimming upstream, I'd like to make a motion.
By all means. Does anybody have any further comment, pro or con, that they want to add before the motion? I see no hands. Okay, very good.
I would move that the Historic District Commission make a determination that the building at 102 South Frederick Avenue may meet the criteria for historic or architectural significance as specified in section 24-226 of the city code, and direct the city manager to temporarily withhold issuance of the demo 16655-2018 up for a reasonable period of time to permit research on the propriety of the historic designation.
Okay, before I ask for a second, can I ask you one further question?
Yes, of course, thank you.
For 104, I forgot to ask you, do you have plans to try and raise that one as well?
I don't believe there's a building on there.
104 is an empty
No,
lot.
it's just a lot.
So he owns, so one
Great
of...
vacant lot.
The
So the
property is
other-
actually
so
two
the-
lots. This
so the
parking lot is a
building-
separate lot from the
That's
building.
not 104. My mistake then. Okay, wonderful. Okay.
And my understanding is there's a process that we've done to change the permit to change it from 2 lots to 1 lot. as
Okay.
as the survey.
That
The
sounds-
surveyor has prepared that.
Okay.
That would be part of the construction.
Thank you very much, because that was my next concern, and that's not, 106 is not yours, and that was the other, I misunderstood. I thought that that was what was going to be coming up in the future. Okay, so does anybody, there's a motion on the table, does anybody second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. Okay, so we have 3 to withhold and 2 against withholding. Okay. There you are. I'm sorry, but we're asking you to bear with the city to do a further study.
Actually,
Did we not? Did I misunderstand it?
As I think I just observed the voting, the motion was to direct the city manager to withhold for a reasonable period of
Yes.
presumably up to 6 months.
Yes, that's what I
The
thought.
motion was seconded.
Yes.
There were 2 in favor, and I counted 3 against.
I
1, 2, 3 in favor.
and
And
2
2
against.
Commissioner Kurtz and I were against.
Okay, because your vote, I thought, came
I
at the
agree.
time, and that's, Chris is nodding too,
Yeah.
so we
What's
heard
that?
the same thing. So we just clarify who was in favor and who was against.
Okay, first let's clarify the motion. The
Yeah,
motion-
well, we knew what the motion was, but
Well-
just what the votes were, so our record is clear.
I understand. The motion is to
Withhold.
withhold the directive to demo for a period of up to 6 months. That's the motion. Okay, I understand that you agreed with that motion to withhold. I agreed with that motion to
Okay.
withhold.
I made it and I agree.
Okay, and then we have 2 on the end that did not agree to withhold. My belief is they want it to be raised now.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so, again, my statement was to you is that we've voted that there's gonna be a study period. So hopefully we can have it done quickly, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
It
very
won't
much.
cost me anything, right? I don't have to do anything?
No, the study is on us, right, Chris?
Yeah, it's on staff.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I have an idea how long it's gonna be?
We
The
have-
maximum withholding
Is
under the
6
code
months.
is 6 months, but my guess is the city manager will have some conversation, at the staff level to determine, because that's really on the city manager's call as to how long to withhold the permit.
Yeah, I mean, we can stress, could you stress to the city manager that we would like it, if possible, to be as quickly as possible?
Right.
Because that information would certainly change people's minds, and there's only one vote away from raising it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a factor of fundamental fairness to the applicant.
Right, right.
Too.
Well, may I ask those people who are in favor of a study, what information would you want to see that would impact your thinking?
For me, it would just to be, just being on the 355 widening, that's all it would be, is that what they would want, if they need this building further back, I'd like to know that.
So if it's within the widening zone and they're gonna demo it anyway when the widening happens? is that what-
Yeah, and if they're fine with the building being where it is, they're not gonna touch it, they're, they don't like it, but they're not doing anything with the road, then why raise it?
Okay, before we get to Mary Jo, it's fine, whoever can, I hope they have a good crystal ball, because how somebody is gonna be able to determine what's gonna happen in the next 30 years, if they can do that, I certainly wanna get them in my employ.
Well,
I think the person with the crystal ball is just taking a seat.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Trudy Schwartz, the Planning Division Chief. The purpose of the 6-month is a study to consider whether the mayor and city council will designate this as a historic.
Oh, really? I did not know
resource.
that.
Yeah.
That's what the purpose of the 6
I did not
months
realize
is.
that.
So that would
makes-
be,
that's
that
a
it would
third
go
reason.
through a hearing process with the mayor and city council, with the planning commission making a recommendation. And I think the Historic District Commission makes a recommendation too. And this city would have to contract someone or do it in-house, a further historic district form for the state and just do the research. So that's what the purpose of the time period
I
is.
did not know that. Did
That's,
anybody hear
that's
that?
what
I
I've
did.
said on the, about
Has-
the code.
has-
The purpose of the
Yeah.
6 months would be that this has a reasonable probability of being designated. That's what, that you would want to go through that process.
Oh, is that what this is about?
That's what the 6 months is
Yes.
about. That's what your
Right.
question is this significant enough that we're gonna designate it?
Okay.
Bear in mind some of the history, as I understand, part of the reason for the creation here, and I know that a couple of the members here have occasionally mentioned it, was that apparently there was a property that was rather suddenly, boom, torn down.
Right.
Said, well, again, if something like that's gonna happen, that's why we have this review in place. But the issue really isn't so much, is there a practical need for it, or even, I mean, you get into the economic issues if it's been designated. Well, this one hasn't. So the question is, would tearing this down basically take away from the city something while you're either in the process or there's a reasonable probability this is going to be designated? And that designation is something you'd recommend, but there is a process for that. And as Trudy said, the final call is that of the mayor and city council to designate this property.
I had no idea.
So that's the
that was
conclusion.
what it was
Yeah.
about.
That's what we've been trying to say. I'm sorry if I
And which
wasn't
is
clear.
not an issue that anybody here has raised that we want to propose.
I agree with that.
Well,
Is-
that's why if you, the staff recommendation was just noting the history that it was looked at in 83, it was
Mhm.
looked at, and then I believe that was
99.
updated in 90.
99.
And then when we just did an update, which was just adopted
A month
a few
ago.
months ago, yeah, or
Okay.
just a month ago, but it's been through a
Right.
process. This was not a property that was designated as
Right.
Or listed.
Is-
something to
It was-
consider.
Is the house to the left of it, which is 106, or anything to the right of it, designated or not?
106 is not designated.
And I assume the one to the right of it is probably not, because that
The
doesn't-
only one that's designated is the Folks building, which is further to the south,
much further.
not much further.
And
just
also the Wilson
another block.
properties, correct?
The
Pardon?
Wilson property?
Mr. Wilson's properties?
No, it's
No,
not
it's not
designated.
designated.
But Mr. Wilson owns the Folks building, so it is Dr. Wilson's, well, it's his
His property.
his stepmother's property.
Okay. Well, I can say this, had I known that that the delay was solely about presenting it to the mayor and council that this building is worth designating, then I would not have voted that way. So based on that, can we reopen the vote legally?
I make a motion that we
Will you-
reconsider the vote.
But
Second.
Well,
How many are in favor?
in terms of propriety, it's,
Gotta do it legally.
those three that voted in favor of it, if one of you wishes to make the motion, then you can second and move forward from there. It sounds like that is your interest.
So you're saying that somebody who, that's right, that's right. I remember that on Robert's Rules. So even though the vote's closed, somebody on.
Yeah, you can reconsider.
Reconsider, okay. Then I'll open a motion to reconsider our vote based on new information.
Now, can anybody second that, or only
Yes.
people?
Yes.
So I'll second that.
All those in favor to reopen the
Aye.
vote?
Aye.
I abstain.
I
Aye.
abstain.
3 ayes
Two
to
abstentions.
2 abstentions to reopen the vote. Okay. Now that it's been reopened,
Do you want me to make the motion again?
does anybody have any further comments before a motion comes to before us? Further comments?
I don't think it's necessary for John to reread it. I think we know what the motion is.
Mhm.
Is
Well,
that true?
The motion's already been made. Your motion now
Is
that
just to
has
vote on
gone
it
forward
again.
is to basically re-vote on the
Okay,
motion.
all right. So we're open to a vote. So all those in favor of, I'll make it simple.
Of John's motion.
The motion as made.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion that's made, which is to withhold the demolition permit, say aye.
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 All those opposed to the motion say nay.
Nay.
Nay. All right, 3 nays, 2 ayes, and that's a first for our, so congratulations.
Well, we're not there yet.
Well, you're
We're
not.
not,
No,
okay.
you're not.
We're not,
Take your
so,
bar.
The staff recommended motion.
Then that needs to be read in.
Yeah, I move that we adopt the recommendation prepared by staff approving, recommending to the city manager demolition.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, that's 4-1.
Now, I can agree,
3-1-1, right?
I can
I'm sorry.
agree to this.
Mary Jo voted
Oh,
for it.
okay.
Yeah.
I can agree to this with the condition,
With the condition,
without
right.
All right, it's
changing my
4-1-1.
vote, just so you know.
So it's 4-1. Right, then we're done.
All right.
Very good, congratulations.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. We'll
You
be
can-
back.
You can
when the
thank this
building-
gentleman.
Well, we look forward. Thank you, sir.
The wheels of historic preservation turn slow but fine.
Thank you.
And
It's all
thank
the
you,
details.
thank you, Trudy. That changed everything.
And Frank, thank you. Really,
Sure.
without your guidance,
Mhm.
because it was very difficult for us to figure out exactly what we're doing, so thank you.
Yeah, without your input, I'd have no idea that that was part of it. All right, very good. So next then is from staff, city project updates.
We have a number of updates. The first is for the Kentlands Mansion Porch Footer Historic Area Work Permit, which was reviewed by the HDC last month. Public Works staff sought to cover the footer with a stone veneer to match the newly installed side garden walls. And the HDC approved the stone veneer, but also gave the option to install brick. And Public Works heeded your advice, and I think this brick turned out well, as I have on the photo here. That's what they installed.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you have a shot from a distance?
I don't.
That's
This is
okay.
what they provided. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's wonderful.
I think it
Yeah.
blends in pretty well.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't think it'll be seen.
It's great. Good job.
For the next city project, at the request of Commissioner LaFrance, we would like to show you the plans for the Forest Oak Cemetery gate along Frederick Avenue. It's not a designated property, but it is a property we targeted, and the preservation element of the master plan is a property to pursue for designation. The design was approved by both the Forest Oak Cemetery Board and the Mayor and City Council, and work should be completed shortly if it is not already underway. The cemetery is keeping the original fence and may utilize it in other parts of the boundary where there is now chain link fencing or no fencing. So this is along 355. They're going to replace the fence here, and we'll go into more detail in further pages. So here is a hardscape plan. And more plans for landscaping, and then we'll get to the actual plans for the gate posts. So it'll say established 1866, and it'll be brick and stone. And
Nice.
here's how the arch will look over the entrance. And here's how the gate will look. And here's more planting. And here's more details on the arch with the sign. And more on the fencing. And the plans recall the cemetery's original entrance, which was removed in the 1960s because hearses could no longer fit through, and that gate is now located in Duval Park, and this is the picture I took of that today, so you can
Nice,
see how
thank
it
you, Chris.
how it matches. If we go back to
That's cool.
what it looks like, so it matches the original, attempts to match the original gate. So the next project update we have is for the Arts Barn roof replacement. The entire shake roof will be replaced in kind, and the rotted wood in the cupola will be repaired. If you glanced at the tentative agenda for this meeting, you saw that the replacement of the shingles in the gable ends, Public Works proposed replacing these shingles with clapboard siding. But upon further discussion with Public Works, we concluded that the damaged shingles could be replaced and repaired in kind rather than completely removed. So we pulled the hop on that, and we'll go forward with that project.
Very good.
Unfortunately, we have some bad news about a historic property, an old tree in the Chestnut Mean Historic District. On a sunny day on June 18th, a seemingly healthy-looking tree at the Martha Meem house fell onto Phil Wessel's house next door at 102 Chestnut Street.
Wow.
And it destroyed the rear bathroom addition. This is from the side
He does-
along
he's
Meem
done so much
Avenue.
work on
Just
his
after that
house.
work he did on the
Yeah,
porch,
right.
oh my gosh,
Oh,
there's no
no.
justice.
That's terrible.
Thankfully, no one was at
Oh, my
home,
God.
but it burst some pipes in the bathroom addition up
Oh,
here and
poor
caused some
guy.
water damage. And then before the workers could get a tarp over that, it rained pretty heavily. So he and his family are staying in a hotel while they sort out the insurance work. But
Oh, that's terrible.
Good Lord.
he is definitely going to rebuild better than ever. So we'll look for that in the next few months.
Wow.
Phil sent me
After
an
all
email
that work
after
on
I
the
checked in.
Yeah.
And he's saying that it may be 8 months before he and his wife and the 2 girls can be back
Oh,
home.
that's
Yeah.
terrible.
And if you recall, last summer he came to the HTC and paid for his neighbor to remove a separate tree, and this tree looked all as fine, but it had significant rot on the inside. So you just never know with these large trees.
And the black and white picture of Martha Meem's 200 acres, this tree was above the house back in the late 1800s. So it was a fully grown tree then.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the next item we have is for impact review areas, and this is something that Commissioner LaFrance has asked for a while. So we're waiting to discuss until after the final approval of the historic preservation element of the master plan by the mayor and city council, and they approved that document on May 21st. So we are moving forward with this item. What we seek tonight is direction from you on potential areas that you would like to see as impact review areas before we take that to the mayor and city council. Per section 24-228, the mayor and city council is the body that approves by resolution the impact areas. That's under D. And it's determined by resolution by the mayor and city council. And it is an area adjoining the perimeter boundaries of any historic district, historic site, or resource. So, just a refresher, impact review areas are areas that adjoin designated properties, as I said, and they would allow the HDC to essentially provide a courtesy review on concept and amendment to final site plans before the Planning Commission gives the final review. None are in place now, of course, and I've included maps that show all potential areas, all adjoining properties. So should we pursue implementation of impact review areas, we would need to notify each potentially affected property owner. So what we would like your input on which properties you would like to see as potential impact review areas. It could be all of them, it could be none of them. If you think it's not necessary to pursue at this time, it could be just those properties adjoining the 2 historic districts. So now let's go through the maps of what I have. First, we have 100 Central Avenue, so it would just be the property right next door. Not this property at 601 because that's in the county. This is the city line, city limits right here. Again, it's just properties that adjoin, so once it crosses the street, it's not eligible to be an impact review area. This is 124 Water Street, again, individually designated, so it would be this entire complex here and these 3 residential properties to either side. This is the Brooks, Russell, and Walker Historic Districts. You see a lot of properties along Maryland Avenue, a lot of residential properties in proximity, and then commercial properties along Frederick Avenue adjoin the historic district. And Chestnut Meem, some commercial properties along Meem Avenue, and more residential properties here. The church that's along West Diamond, and then this property that's along Perry Parkway. The Crown properties, a few residential properties here. This is HOA owned, I believe, water retention areas. In the Kentlands, we have a few residential properties. The lines in the middle, they're owned by the HOA, that's their streets. And this is the Old Town area. All these properties are individually designated. The Y site, which as you know is now the crossings at Old Town, and then 20 South Summit Avenue is also individually designated. So now the city-owned property right next door would fall under an adjoining property, as well as St. Martin's on the corner. And then over here we have the train station and Grawlers. 24 East Diamond is now the funeral home. And here's some individually designated properties along 355. So we see this is the Folks House, which was mentioned earlier tonight at 208 South Frederick Avenue, so the properties that adjoin that. 202 South Summit Avenue is the church-owned property, and then the properties around the observatory, the residential properties. And that's all of them. So I'll open it for discussion, and if anyone has any questions.
I do. What kind of control do we then have over the properties we would elect to include?
So as the code states under A, essentially anything amendment to final site plan or concept review plan, that anything that has to go to planning commission, the HDC would give essentially a courtesy review. It would
Courtesy
be,
review?
Right.
Yeah.
It would not be
Okay.
binding, it would
Then all
be
of them.
like a courtesy
That's what I
review.
said.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I like the idea, but this is your child, so please tell us your thoughts of what you like about these things. Is there anything special, and what are your thoughts on some or all?
I would just say that many of the zones that we looked at tonight are already in courtesy review areas.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just reaffirming that.
Mhm.
What I was looking for also, and this is something we'll have to discuss and see if we even can do anything about it. I'm very passionate about changing the sign ordinance in historic districts to reflect what we're already doing in Old Town. Because as I don't know how many of you were here last year when I did a little bit of a slideshow to show you the outskirts entrances and exits of the couple of historic districts we have here in the city. And the commercial signage was out of control. And it's disrespectful, in my opinion, to these historic sites. And I feel like it's just a good quality control to go back and look at this and say, how can we be respectful of these areas and also allow for commercial advertisement? So those are the things. That's just what brought me here.
Okay, Chris, about how many properties is in that, roughly? Is it 50?
Yeah, I think that would be a good estimate.
What would
estimation.
that do to our workload? If we have to see 50 potential properties, signage, and other items, would that like double our, I mean, how would you ever know?
Yeah,
But
it's
do
really
you
hard.
think- Do you think?
A lot of these properties are residential properties.
Right.
Really, it's the commercial properties that have the highest potential to come to the HDC
Right.
for redevelopment, but it's really just hard to judge how much or
Well,
how little it would increase the workload.
If some of these residential properties wanted to have an addition, that would come before us then at that point?
It depends on the size of the addition, but if it's a large addition or adding a second story to a one-story house, that's something that would come to the HDC.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So go back to the slide with the, I guess it's the Perry Parkway along with the Chestnut Mean. So those, I guess, commercial properties there.
Yeah.
Should someone do a new signage on one of those properties, is that something that we would have to do a courtesy review for?
Not for a signed permit, it would only be if the entire property was redeveloped, and then the
Okay.
HDC could hypothetically weigh in on any potential signage.
Okay,
for
so not just for
fencing.
typical turnover of a
Right, not
tenant
permits.
fit out space?
Actually, it says in the thing that if they want to remove a sign or remove fences or trees on the sites located in the impact area, then that would be something that you would look at too.
So there's maybe some unintended consequences for some of these things.
Trees and fences and signs,
Yeah.
yeah, which is,
I mean, some of them, yeah. I mean, some of these buildings that are directly adjacent to and visually adjacent to the designated properties, yeah, you want to have that kind of impact, but
And interestingly, those properties that you pointed out, they're probably the buildings are about 100 feet away from the property line. And also vertically, they're about 30 feet below.
Yeah.
Mhm.
those.
Yes.
So
So
that's-
it's,
Yeah, it's hard to think of those buildings and the Chestnut Beam District being,
Okay.
And that's neither at an entrance or an exit, just pointing that out.
alternatively, like Gaithersburg High School, for instance, would also have been something we would have had a courtesy review for, which would have been interesting from the county.
that would be
Yeah, it looks like it is.
interesting because they technically do not have to fall under the city zoning, so it's,
Mhm.
I'm not sure how that would work out. I think Frank would have to do some research.
Well, this is
I'm not
all
saying
the-
do it, Frank, but
It's a courtesy review anyway. If
It's a
they-
courtesy review
If they
of the
agree
planning
to it, that's
commission.
fine, but you're right, they're
It's
considered, Board of Ed's considered state entities, so
Just look at the
we don't
size
have
of
the
damn
ability to
thing.
force
I
it.
know, it's like a city.
How much time is this gonna add to, like an applicant goes to the planning commission,
Wow.
and then, you know, how much time is this gonna add to it? Would we be right before the planning commission, right after? I'm just looking at that.
Yeah,
aspect,
judging
too.
based on courtesy reviews, it would add approximately an extra month because they would need to go to the HDC before we could take them to the planning commission.
and if there's changes that are recommended by the HDC and they want to follow up on it, then that adds another month for them to get the drawings done and things like that.
Well, I believe it's a protection that the historic resources deserve, and that outweighs a little inconvenience. And it's also quality control. I think this board is filled with amazing people that have a great deal of wisdom and knowledge, and I believe that our input improves projects, usually.
What are your thoughts on,
We'd like to think so.
Well, that's not a question. That's just a given.
what are your thoughts on the different zones? Are you leaning towards all of them? All the 50 parcels or so that they're showing? Or do you have more concerns over some than others?
And certainly, you know, we don't have to make a decision.
Yeah, that's what I'm
tonight.
leaning towards anyway.
My
but-
answer is I would like to study this further, and then I can
Okay.
answer your question.
Okay.
Is there gonna be?
This is the first time I'm seeing it, so I didn't see it on
I didn't
the
see it
record,
either.
so.
I didn't see it on
You
mine.
said you're gonna send it out to each of these properties. Are they gonna get a chance for public input on?
Yeah, they would have to be
Absolutely.
They'll be
notified and we'd
notified.
have to
So-
have
I
that.
mean, notify, but will they have like a setting
Public
to talk
hearing
about,
or
public
whatever.
hearing
Yes.
to that
The mayor and
effect?
city
So,
council.
could maybe, because I'm in the same boat as Mary Jo, could maybe you send this to us and we could reflect on it
Yeah,
for next
absolutely.
week?
Okay,
'Cause
great,
it's-
thank you. We could also say, okay, let's say hypothetically, the buildings on Perry Parkway aren't really that close to a historic district and not really relevant, a completely different street,
Mhm.
30 feet down, what have you, and maybe craft it to where we feel that only this significant properties.
No, I agree, we could pick the properties.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Is it possible, what I'd like to do is absolutely, let's review it for a month or more. I'd like to see it a month or two.
Oh,
Would
sure.
you be willing to review it yourself? We're all going to review it when we
Yeah,
receive
yeah.
it. And then give us your input. Because this, like I said, this is, you've been leading the charge on this. And there's two things I want to say. It's a very important thing. And I love how you were persistent. This has been going on for like a year and a half, every month. So I know it's important to you, but I would love to hear,
Yeah.
particularly since you're so heavily involved in the community, your vantage points on these. So I would love to know which ones are most important to you. What do you consider, critical enough for you to bring this up and to essentially continue to drive the train on it?
I just want to prevent some of the surprise things that have happened in the past from happening again that can actually be destructive to historically
Fully agree.
designated properties.
I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay. All
And I
righty.
would, just as a precaution, that if you ask Mary Jo, for instance, to say, just could you identify for us the ones that you have concerns about, or if you're
Yeah.
okay with everything? If there's dialogue back and forth, just because of potential open
Good
meetings
point.
issues, we would just say, hold the dialogue for the meeting
Oh,
to
no,
the extent,
exactly.
unless you have questions
That's what I
back and
thought.
forth.
Yeah.
But certainly
Yeah.
sharing fact like that should be
Right.
fine.
She's okay to send it to us.
Sure.
Let's just not
Not a
talk
problem.
amongst ourselves
Right,
in
exactly.
emails or
Actually,
behind
Chris is
closed doors.
sending it out to you
Right.
all, and then we'll come back and
Well,
she'll
what I
bring
was
her
hoping to do was
information.
hear it ahead of time, so.
Right,
but
we're gonna email it out tomorrow.
I'm saying her comments, you're saying that, I think Frank is saying it's okay for her to send us her thoughts, but we just should not comment on it.
I would just-
Actually, she should send her thoughts to Chris, and
Right.
then we
Oh,
can
sure.
distribute it with the package.
Oh, I see what
How's
you're saying,
that?
wonderful. That's perfect. Okay, very good.
That's all I have.
Wonderful, all
And
right.
everybody else can send their thoughts too, so.
I
Just
just,
Mary.
real quick, I wanted to say that the Forest Oak Cemetery had some lovely original cast iron fencing. And Chris, I'm sorry it wasn't part of your explanation. Didn't you say some of that is in storage and going to be reused?
Yeah.
From,
Trudy,
from what we have, the cemetery board asked that we put the fence back in their, by their storage shed. And they are, will decide how to use it, but one of the ideas that was brought up at one of the city meetings with them was to possibly replace some of the existing chain link fencing.
Oh, well, sure, yes.
But it does take funds for them to do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, anything else from commission? Yes, sir.
Well, the Maryland Historic District Commission met. Actually, they had a symposium last Saturday at the University of Maryland. And the title of it was very interesting. You know, the roof leaks, but there's no money in the wallet. And with very good representation from private people and other commissioners. And anyway, originally I'd been designated to pick up all the goodies and take them out there, and my shoulder went out, so instead, on behalf of the commission, I just financed the goodies. So this was in our name, so they love us.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank
That's
you.
wonderful.
Very good. Anything else? Any other comments, thoughts, or questions? No? Okay.
We have our homework.
Hereby adjourned. Thanks, everyone.